Welcome back to another episode of UFC Underworld Fight Club. Thanks for joining me. Today we'll be having a little discussion about Alex Pereira versus Jiří Prochazka at UFC 303 and how I believe Jiří Prochazka will win his light heavyweight title back by submitting Alex Pereira. Let's begin. Alex Pereira's confidence is at an all-time high right now, and he's got every reason to have such a high level of confidence because he's shown up to the UFC from kickboxing and has whipped the ass of everyone who stood across from him. Israel Adesanya has been the only person to achieve a win over him in the UFC, which happened to be at middleweight, and to be honest with you, I believe the only reason Izzy achieved that win is because Alex Pereira was drained from his weight cut, which led to him being knocked out in the second round. He's always been too big for the middleweight division, and the only reason he was fighting at middleweight was to hunt down Israel Adesanya and get his revenge for Adesanya running his big fucking mouth in that interview. And he achieved that. So after he lost the title in the Izzy rematch, he immediately moved up to light heavyweight, mostly due to the exhausting weight cuts, but also because he wasn't going to get that third fight with Izzy. Adesanya was the biggest star at the time, and it's only right that he has the belt, and Dana White would rather it stay that way. When asked, Dana White stated he had no plans to book a third fight between Adesanya and Pereira, so it looks like Alex kinda had no choice but to move up if he ever wanted to be a champion again and get those big championship checks. The consensus amongst the elite of the light heavyweight division was that Alex Pereira was gonna be easy work because he had no takedown defense or grappling experience. But if you've been watching closely, you would have known that Alex Pereira has been training with Glover Teixeira for a good while now, so the idea that he's got no grappling defense is a pretty stupid one given that Glover Teixeira is an expert level grappler. So what do you think Alex Pereira has been training in the training room with Glover Teixeira? Alex Pereira has always had exquisite striking and kickboxing. I mean, he was the champion in his previous promotion, so it's only logical to believe that he's been with Glover Teixeira working on his takedown defense and possibly a little jiu-jitsu, and that showed in his fight against Jan Blachowicz. Well, to a certain degree. I mean, Alex still got taken down and dominated for a good amount of time during that fight, but once Jan gassed out, Alex was able to defend the takedowns. But a notable aspect of that fight is that Alex was still not able to finish the fight with a gassed out Jan in front of him, and he won by split decision. But that was just his first fight at light heavyweight. Alex Pereira went on to finish Jiří Prochazka in the second round of their fight, well, at least that's what it says on paper, and win the light heavyweight title. I believe that fight was stopped a little too soon, and Jiří Prochazka was just being a good sport about it during his post-fight interview. Alex Pereira went on to his first title defense and flatlined Jamal Hill, and there's no dispute about that one. Jamal Hill was flat on his ass, getting his cranium cracked, and the stoppage was justified. So we know he's got the power to put down these light heavyweights. Now, Alex Pereira is set to run it back with Jiří Prochazka at UFC 303, and I don't believe Alex Pereira is going to get it done this time. I really don't believe he should have gotten it done the first time when he faced Jiří Prochazka. But Jiří Prochazka's a dog, and he admittedly made the mistake against Alex Pereira by utilizing his signature hands-down, chin-up samurai style in an attempt to beat Alex Pereira at his own game, and he learned that Alex Pereira was not the one to do that kind of shit with. I can't say that I truly believe that Jiří Prochazka is going into this fight a totally new fighter, because if you watched UFC 300, you would have seen Jiří Prochazka doing the same old shit, hands down, chin up, charging in at his opponent, trying to land a shot, and it worked against Alexander Rakic, which is a huge issue because in Yuri's mind, at this point, the only time this style didn't work was against Alex Pereira. He's done all this against all of his opponents and has taken a lot of damage for it, but in the end, he got his hand raised. Jiří Prochazka is a fighter who has a lot of pride and ego like every other fighter. He's not ready to totally abandon the strategy that's gotten him to this level and ultimately got him a championship, although by the skin of his teeth when he submitted Glover Teixeira in the final 30 seconds of their fight. Despite how good of a fighter Jiří is, he got his ass kicked pretty badly by a 40-year-old man that night who was about to win on the judges' scorecards if he hadn't secured that late submission. And I believe the only reason Jiří almost lost that fight is due to his ridiculous style. I believe that he could have chosen to submit Glover Teixeira at any time he wanted during that fight, but his stubbornness led him to choose the hard way. Even with all that being said, I think Jiří Prochazka will get it done against Alex Pereira this time. I think he's learned his lesson about the power of Alex Pereira and respects him a little more now that he's been in there with him. Because like I stated earlier, Jan Blachowicz was able to get Alex Pereira down and keep him down for the entire first round, and Alex Pereira was only able to get up in the second round after Jan took him down once Jan was gassed. Jiří Prochazka doesn't have a gas tank issue like Jan Blachowicz. If you recall UFC 282, Jan gassed out in this fight against Magomed Ankalaev. So, not to discredit Alex Pereira, but he's had a somewhat circumstantial road to the light heavyweight strap. I believe despite all the shit Jamal Hill talked, he was scared shitless during fight week, and you could see how nervous he was. Even during the first round of that fight, he let Alex back him all the way up to the gate, and I feel that Jamal Hill was defeated by the aura of Poatan before he even got in the octagon that night. He was just selling wolf tickets with all of his talk because he was probably receiving pay-per-view points for stepping up on short notice as the main event. So essentially, he's selling the fight for his own benefit, which probably explains why he's been flexing his UFC 300 paycheck earnings on X in response to all the trolls antagonizing him for his first round KO loss to Alex Pereira after talking such a big game. He literally can't say anything in his defense for why he lost, so flashing the money he made from the fight is the only thing he can resort to. But Jiří Procházka is cut from a different cloth. He was hard on himself for his performance against Glover, even though he had just won the championship. There's no way in hell you would ever see Jiří Procházka on X flashing money like an insecure bozo after getting his ass kicked in front of the entire world. He'd probably be off somewhere in the forest training to improve his skills because he has too much respect for himself as well as high expectations for his abilities as a true martial artist. Jiří Procházka was able to get Alex Pereira down during their first fight. Alex Pereira is not going to become a high-level grappler just by training with Glover Teixeira for a few years. He is still very susceptible to being taken down, and his fights at light heavyweight have shown that. Even after training with Glover Teixeira, Izzy took him down, Jan took him down, and Jiří took him down. So with the right strategy, Alex can be put on his back and eventually submitted, and that's what I believe will happen when he fights Jiří Procházka at UFC 303. I believe the combination of Alex Pereira's confidence and thinking that he can effortlessly knock out anybody he fights while having mediocre takedown defense, along with Jiří Procházka's broader skill set and intelligence, knowing that Alex is just too dangerous on the feet, will result in Jiří Procházka taking Alex Pereira down, and this time he is going to submit him and never let him have a chance at getting back up, and that's exactly what Jiří Procházka needs to do to have a sure shot at winning this fight. Although I pointed out a lot of what Jiří Procházka did wrong in their first fight, let's take a look at the first round of that fight between Alex Pereira and Jiří Procházka and point out what he did right. Jiří Procházka caught Alex near the fence and single-legged Alex backwards towards the fence. Alex, having no solid grappling defense, immediately reacted by jumping guillotine, which if you recall he also tried in his fight against Jan, which didn't work, and he ended up almost getting submitted in the first round, but was eventually taken down. And he ended up getting taken down again when he tried it against Jiří. When you look at how Alex got taken down by Jiří, it was because he was focused on striking, which is natural for him because it's what he's been doing all of his career, and it's going to be very hard for him to just totally adjust his style to result in him having a strong effective defense against takedowns. Jiří, on the other hand, has been competing strictly in MMA all of his career, so takedowns and grappling have always been a part of his arsenal. Jiří held Alex down and employed some strong ground and pound, but Alex Pereira was eventually able to get back up. When you look at how he was able to get back up, you'll find that it was because he was able to isolate Jiří Procházka's right leg, preventing Jiří from adjusting his position to keep Alex down. Then Alex shifted his hips towards the gate and made his way up back to his feet. Due to Jiří's mistake of futility trying to smash Alex in half guard, Jiří wasn't adjusting his position according to Alex Pereira's to keep him down, as he was focused solely on trying to beat Alex Pereira to a pulp and get the stoppage. By the time he realized that Alex Pereira was on his way back up to his feet, he tried to reach for his leg to keep him down, but Alex Pereira was already halfway up and was inevitably able to win the hand fight and get back to his feet. If Jiří would have just made that one small adjustment, I don't think Alex Pereira would have ever gotten back up, because he wasn't able to when he fought Jan in the same position. But there's still the question to be asked as to how Jiří is going to deal with the leg kicks. Even though those leg kicks looked devastating in their first fight, let's give Jiří Procházka more credit for what he did right in that situation, which was close the distance. And because Pereira isn't firmly grounded due to the short amount of time it takes to draw back from the leg kicks he's throwing, Jiří Procházka was able to dash in and distract Alex by throwing shots up top while level changing low, targeting Pereira's midsection to initiate a takedown. This is how he was able to get Alex down, and it worked, and I don't think he should change it up. Jiří Procházka's keys to victory in his rematch against Alex Pereira are going to be grappling and submissions. Let's take another look at the end of the first round. Alex Pereira was able to make it back up to his feet, but he was noticeably breathing very heavy. If Jiří Procházka abandons his stubbornness to want to stand with Alex and go toe-to-toe, he can drain Alex Pereira and get him to quickly submit from sheer pressure and exhaustion, breaking his will to persistently fight off Jiří Procházka's submission attempts. And that's what Jiří Procházka needs to do. Alex Pereira hasn't had any hard fights at light heavyweight because everyone who has fought him keeps trying to prove a point by fighting him where he's strongest. It's no coincidence that the only person who has been able to beat him in the UFC was another kickboxer, Israel Adesanya. Alex Pereira hasn't gone to the 5th round at all while fighting at light heavyweight, so he hasn't have to carry his new added weight for long into a fight due to him having finished most of his opponents in the first and second rounds. And I don't think he's prepared to go 5 rounds at light heavyweight with him taking this fight on such short notice and having to drop 22 pounds in only about a week's time. I think that he's confident that he's got the equalizer in his left hand and that it'll continue to work and get his opponents out of there early. But he also hasn't had the task of having to rematch any opponents at light heavyweight, and the one time he did have to rematch someone was when he rematched Izzy at middleweight and he didn't win that fight. This is really an important factor because now that Jiří Procházka has had the opportunity of being in there with Alex Pereira, he's hopefully learned from his mistakes made the first time, just like Israel Adesanya did. Alex Pereira, on the other hand, has yet to make any mistakes that have led to him losing a fight, so it's highly unlikely that he'll take a different approach to this fight, which is what I believe will work against him and lead to him ultimately losing this fight. In all honesty, Magomed Ankalaev should have been given the victory in his fight against Jan Blachowicz and crowned the new light heavyweight champion at UFC 282. And Jan even admitted that he believed Ankalaev won the fight that night. But because of some idiotic judges and possibly other things unseen, this led to Jamal Hill winning the vacant strap in his fight against Glover Teixeira. Before this fight, Glover Teixeira was offered a fight with Ankalaev but turned it down, stating that he needed more time to prepare. So if an expert level submission artist like Glover Teixeira needed more time to prepare for Ankalaev, and that's who Alex Pereira is learning all of his grappling from, it's safe to say Alex Pereira would not beat Magomed Ankalaev if that fight was to happen. Magomed Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira should be the main event at UFC 303 instead of Alex Pereira versus Jiří Procházka 2. But here we are. I don't believe that Alex Pereira would defeat Magomed Ankalaev in a fight, and that's the reason why this fight hasn't happened yet, even though it obviously should have. The UFC wants to put on exciting fights, and that's part of the reason why Ankalaev lost the night he fought Jan Blachowicz, because he didn't really put up a fight that excited Dana White. Dana White stated during the UFC 282 post-fight press conference that the fight sucked. So, even though everyone knows that Ankalaev would hold Alex Pereira down and walk away with the strap, that fight is being avoided in favor of a matchup with Jiří Procházka to leave himself exposed to danger when he fights, combined with Alex Pereira currently being one of the most dangerous strikers in the UFC. So this will more than likely equate to a much more exciting stand-up war of boxing and kickboxing. The way that Alex Pereira knocks his opponents out is simple, if you understand fighting. He takes to an orthodox stance, but his left lead hand is actually his power punch. So he simply holds his lead left hand forward and his right hand back, which is the hand opponents will typically be watching out for. And then suddenly, Alex Pereira cocks his lead left hand back and around to form the hook that goes around his opponent's guard, which they never see coming, which is why it puts them out every time. The reason why Jiří was able to have so much success in that first round against Alex Pereira, even though I gave him a lot of shit for it, is because rather than having his hands out in front of him like a traditional fighter would, he's got his hands out of the way and low, so he has a full view of his opponent's body and movements. He can see both hands of his opponents, both legs, and any subtlety in their movements, and Jiří immediately takes all open opportunities to strike with whichever weapon is necessary. This is also why Alex Pereira was never able to land that devastating left hook on Jiří, because Jiří Procházka is never a stationary target like your typical fighter would be. Alex Pereira likes to bounce forward towards his target with his left lead hand outward, and as soon as he's close enough, he'll throw that left hook. With Jiří constantly moving, he never had the chance to, until Jiří made the error in judgment to charge Alex Pereira towards the fence, throwing a right punch and then lowering his hands to attempt the takedown while leaving his head exposed to Alex's right hook, when Jiří Procházka should have had his head ducked under to the right and behind Alex Pereira out of harm's way like he did when he successfully achieved the first takedown on Alex Pereira in their first round. Last but not least, Alex Pereira is 36 years old. We all know about the over 35 curse when it comes to MMA fighters and championship fights. Alex Pereira has evaded the curse for 1 year, being 1 year over 35. He's currently 36 years old, but he also hasn't been in the UFC very long, and I think this is the fight that the curse catches up to him. A quick rise such as Alex Pereira's in the UFC will be met with an equally as fast fall. So that's my prediction. Jiří Procházka will defeat Alex Pereira at UFC 303 by submission in the first round and become a 2-time light heavyweight champion of the world. Alex Pereira will go on to either fight Magomed Ankalaev and get completely dominated on the ground and retire, or he'll try to move up again, this time to heavyweight, and he'll get knocked into the shadow realm again, this time by Tom Aspinall, and then he'll retire. Either way, the end of the fascinating story of Alex Pereira unfortunately begins at UFC 303. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.